So last time we were together, we were talking about not showing the subject evidence. Talk about some of the
Right.
pitfalls of it, right? Changes the entire trajectory of the conversation, gives them an item to attack. You could be accused by a defense attorney of feeding them information out there. It's going to make verifying their confession a little bit more difficult. And we were talking about verifying that confession, weren't we? And it sounds like once
Yes.
you get a confession from a subject, I'm done, right? I don't have to do anything else. As soon as they confess, I'm done. I can lock them up. I can go home, wash my hands of the case, and move on to the next one. Or do we need to do something after that?
I think we obviously have to verify what they are telling us is correct.
Exactly. That's right. We have a lot of follow-up work to do after the confession. As a little side note, little anecdotal story, if you are an investigator, detective, law enforcement officer, it may be very, very tempting if you are working a case, especially a high-profile case, a case that's gotten some political teeth behind it. You need to have a conversation with your supervisor and say, look, when and if we learn the truth in the form of a confession, you need to tell the sheriff, agency head, or police chief to hold off at least a little while before we do a press release. Because what a press release can do is it can affect my follow-up investigation after getting a confession. So that's what me and Dan are going to talk about today. We are going to talk about the follow-up investigation. So Dan, if I have, let's say, a homicide suspect, okay, and he says to me, you're right, Frank, I shot him, I killed the guy, and I ask him, where's the gun? And he says, well, I threw the gun and it's under a bridge somewhere. Should I go and get the gun, or can I just leave it at that and not worry about it? What should I do after that?
No,
What do you think?
we have to substantiate everything, because all this is going to be attacked unless they're pleading guilty in court, and that. So anything that they tell you as far as where a weapon is, anything, you have to make an effort to try to obtain the weapon, bloody clothes. Even people that acknowledge stealing items. What did you do with the items? Well, I sold
Yes,
them at a
yes.
pawn shop. Okay. Well,
What
now
pawn
after,
shop? Yeah.
yeah, get all those details, and then you have to go out and determine, if what the individual is saying is actually true. You don't want these things being brought up in court and the defense now saying, well, you said he was at a pawn shop. Which pawn shop? Well, he didn't tell me. How do you know he just didn't make that up? So anything that they tell you, we have to confirm. And that's protecting you against the idea of the false confession. And that's where I think a lot of investigators run into problems, where in reality they may have a real confession from the person, but because they didn't do the follow-ups to substantiate everything, the defense now is able to start bringing in the idea of that this could be a very much a false confession. And the nowadays with people is that your word, you have to, maybe years ago people would take it as that, but now you have to substantiate everything.
100% on that, yes. And the key item with this, Dan, is going to be substantiation. And if it's okay with you, I would like to share a little bit of my
Yeah.
experiences in law enforcement. First of all, if you are a brand new investigator, brand new detective, I would highly recommend having this as a best practices for your investigation. And if you are a seasoned vet, if you're a little bit salty dog out there, welcome to the show. You found the right place. Like and subscribe, share us with a friend, right? But
Thank you.
I would recommend getting a search warrant for any and all follow-up evidence collection. As I like to explain in my seminars, a lot of us, because we're overworked, because we're overburdened, and just because that's how we've been trained, but you have those consent to search forms that we use for victims, we use for witnesses, we use for evidence collection. That's really good for the initial reporting officer. That's really good to get the beginning stages of your investigation. But especially after you get a confession from a subject, get a search warrant, my friends. Get a search warrant, because what happens, Dan gave us the example of a pawn shop. Suppose I have someone, hey, they robbed someone, they went and they took the money from them, or they took an item, they sold it at a pawn shop. I go to the pawn shop. I don't know the relationship between the pawn shop owner or the employee and my suspect. I may show up there and they'll say, well, yeah, sure. You can come back here, Frank, or you can come back here, Dan. Look at our footage over here. You look at the footage, you get copies of the footage, and you think you're good. But what can happen, my friends, is that that pawn shop owner may think better about it and say, you know what? I knew the stuff was stolen. I knew those items were hot. But if they lock him up, that's going to make me look real bad. And a lot of times they'll actually go over to the defense attorney's side, and they are making statements, Dan, and they're making statements,
Yeah.
my listeners and viewers, saying, hey, I actually didn't give him permission. I didn't give her permission to take that video. And then all of a sudden, you have evidence that you submitted as part of a Rule 5 discovery in your case, and it's getting suppressed at that point.
Well,
Or
look,
you're having to testify. I mean, it's just
exactly.
nuts.
Look what's happening right now in New York, and I believe his name is Luigi Maggioni.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
How you would think, I mean, the guy is on video shooting that individual. It's you would think it's a shutting, it's a no contest at all. But now they're contesting about the search of the backpack and things like that. It may
That's
not
right,
go
yeah.
anywhere, but why put yourself in a position where the potential problems could come up? I think the more you
Exactly.
lock him
Yes,
in,
yes.
the better you're going to be.
Yes, and the best thing about a search warrant is that it eliminates a witness, a victim, a suspect, or somebody on the scene from saying, well, I didn't do that. I didn't tell them that they had permission to do it. If you get a search warrant, and especially
Right.
what a search warrant, and what it does as well is you have to tag the evidence for the return inventory back to a judge almost more thorough than you do your inventory sheet into evidence itself. You have two copies of the evidence. It's a system of redundancy, and it just protects you. So, if you get a confession, my friends, and it says, hey, the gun's under the bridge, go over there, locate the gun, set up a crime scene, do our workarounds, work the grid pattern. I know it sucks. I know it's dumb. But as Dan said, you don't want a defense attorney up there asking you why you didn't go those additional steps. And what
Or
it can
talk
show,
to other
exactly,
people.
yeah.
If
Talk
he
to other
says,
people. Yes, yes.
well, who else knows? Another question, certainly when you get people to admit it, is who else did you tell about this? Well, I told my best friend, Bobby. Okay, what did Bobby say about it? Well, he said, I can understand you doing it, but and that. Well, go talk to Bobby and get Bobby's statement now. I mean, that's another witness that you could possibly bring in against your suspect, that he actually did admit this to someone else.
Exactly, yes. And another thing that doing a follow-up investigation is going to help you is that right now, my friends and colleagues and professionals out there, there is a cultural narrative shift really against police in general. And one thing
Yeah.
that they do is they try and present it so that you are biased in your investigation from day one. Well, you knew the person was guilty. You knew she stole it. You knew he murdered the guy. And this whole thing is just a setup just to get a confession. Well, once you get a confession that has elements that you can externally, independently substantiate, that's only going to go to show the unbiased nature of your investigation from day one. And you said, well, yeah, sure. He told me where the gun is, so I went looking for it. He told me that he told Sally, like Dan just gave us, why he did it and where he was. And that's going to give your suspect an opportunity to guard against a false confession. And you can say, not only did
Right.
the confession contain elements of the crime that I never revealed to the suspect, but he provided me details I didn't know about, but I later independently verified. And that's going to be a good, best standard practice of procedure. As a matter of fact, speaking of best practices, Dan, that sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? One of our best practices. That's right. Yeah, the confession is never the end of the story in it. And the last thing that you want to do is to be on the stand being cross-examined by some defense attorney who was trying to plant the seed of doubt in a jury that your investigation was implicitly biased against the defendant from day one. and if you can go up there and talk 10 or 15 minutes about your extensive follow-up investigation after a confession, it's only going to help you is what it's going to do. I had someone who was accused of inappropriate sexual contact with a minor, and I hope that the YouTube gods out there aren't going to destroy our video with this, but we're working this case. This is when I was at the sheriff's office, and excuse me, he described a picture on the victim's ceiling during the course of the assault, right? In addition to some other stuff as well. I got a second search warrant. I'd already worked the room, but I didn't take a picture of the ceiling from this angle. I lay down in the same position where the attack happened, and I laid back with the camera, and I took a picture as it described exactly from the standpoint of the perpetrator what the room looked like when he was committing the crime in there. And that only went to substantiate his confession in there. So little things like that can really help, but
never take anything for granted.
Never take them for granted. That's right, yeah. And these consent to search forms, if anyone out there has private investigative experience, legal experience, law enforcement, they're your friends today and they're your enemies tomorrow. This person can be a victim one day, and then they get wrapped up in some other investigation where they're a suspect. So search warrant, search warrant, search warrant, chain of custody on every single thing that you do. Even witness statements, I tagged them into evidence. I tagged them in. I gave them an item control number. I didn't leave anything out there unturned with it because you just don't want to get Rule 5'd and burned on it. But yeah, follow-up investigations, it helps guarding against false confessions.
You know, even when you have individuals where it maybe not a very serious type of offense, a theft of money or something, the individual says, well, yeah, I spent it. Well, what did you spend it on? I paid some bills. What bills did you pay with that? Well, I paid my electric bill. Okay, how much was that? When was that? I mean, these questions are just locking them in to make sure that no one later on is going to say is that, well, he just said that, to say it just to get out of that room.
Exactly, that's right. And I like how you phrase that, Dan, and I think that's something that we actually teach in our seminars, how to ask those all-important follow-up questions with them. That's going to help get those details. How much of it? What kind of denominations were the bills that you took? And like you said, what did you do with
it?
Yeah.
And one of the things, too, and I just thought of this, Frank, is that sometimes, too, where I don't like this statement, but a lot of investigators will say, okay, Frank acknowledges, okay, I did it. Now the investigator makes the mistake and says to Frank, now, Frank, okay, tell me what you did. Exactly. And leave it all up to them. Where that person is now in an emotional state where they're thinking, I shouldn't have said maybe what I did. Maybe people aren't going to understand. Now I got to explain why I did it. I think it's a little bit better if we ask the question, they give an answer. Question and answer, question and answer. And after you go through all that, then you can go back and say, okay, Frank, again in your own words, explain to me what happened. Where you get at them giving you a narrative. Exactly,
yes. And what I found out with some of these suspects is that if you give an inch, they'll take a mile from you. We talked about the alibi question, but whenever they admit to what they did, when you get the admission, which is different than a confession, as we talked about earlier, but whenever they start talking, if you leave it open-ended, well, what did you do? Tell me what happened. Then they'll tell you what they had for breakfast. They'll say, and then I did the thing. And they may think about it, like you said, and they may be thinking, oh, holy crud, wait a minute, what did I almost do, right? I almost said, something that could get me into a whole lot of trouble, I better shut my mouth. They may start to think rational at that point.
And I think the questions that you're asking to substantiate everything, too, should be made in a way that it's not challenging. It's like me and you are talking right now. It's a conversation. You're still maintaining that rapport with that individual. It's not like, okay, I got you now. You shouldn't have said what you did, but now I got you. You don't want to do that because, again, at any time that person can totally back off what they're saying. Okay, I'm not saying anything else. So,
exactly.
the more you get them talking, I think they become more comfortable with what they're saying to you.
Mm-hmm. And then the devil's going to be in the details. And what happened next? Well, I went into the bathroom. What were you doing in the bathroom? Well, I took my shoes off. Where are your shoes now? Well, I put
Right.
them in the ceiling. And then I'm like, all right, I've got the shoes in the ceiling. I have follow-up I can do.
Yeah.
Is there dirt on the floor from the shoes, from what happened, tracking it in? And this is where you can get the information in your follow-up stuff in there. But and again, as a side note, if you're
And I
working
think one
yeah.
other thing too, Frank, and it just dawned on me too, is that it's important that you get the details as quickly as you can after the admission.
Exactly.
What
Yes,
you know,
yes.
a lot of investigators, they're happy. Oh, I got the person to admit guilt. I remember as a new interviewer and an interrogator, I just very short on the job and going in there, and I felt so good. I got the person to admit what they did, and I would come out of there and tell my supervisor, I got him to admit it. Okay, Dan, what did they say they did with the stuff that they stole? I didn't ask him. And when did they say
Yeah,
they stole?
yeah.
I didn't ask him. Get
Oh,
back
no.
in there. But now, I might have been out of that room maybe just a very short period of time, 10 minutes, explaining, oh, I got the person to admit it. Now I go back in there 10 minutes later. They've been sitting there by themselves thinking, you know what? I shouldn't have said that. This is all bad. And I go back in there. Now, again, I'm trying to get details. What do you mean I stole them? I didn't steal nothing. And now they totally
Exactly.
back off.
Yeah.
It's important that after they admit it, don't step out. Start asking questions to corroborate what they did.
Exactly. Yes. It's really amazing. Like, if they have a reset point, where they can begin to think like in their own, I guess, self-interest, then they're definitely going to take it. But when you get the
Yes.
admission, oh, so I've seen this too. I've seen, like, you have one person who maybe took our seminar, our 4-day seminar, our 3+1, our 31, whatever it happens to be, our child abuse seminar. We have all kind of programs out there, and you will find a link in the show notes as well in our link tree. But you'll have one or two people at a department, and they get really good at interviewing and interrogation. And what I've noticed about the dynamics in law enforcement is that you have people who pick up these pocket skills, Dan. One person's like the evidence person. They can get a fingerprint, off of a dead mouse under a house that's been there 100 years, and it's been soaking in oil all day. And you have other ones that are good at finding folks, and they'll say, well, you know what? I don't really know the guy's name. The street name is Peanut. Oh, that's so and so, and he lives blah blah blah. And I'm like, what the hell? How did you even know that, right? But the ones that get the reputation is being good at interviewing and interrogating, and really it doesn't take too much to get a reputation like that. You have a couple of home runs, my friends, using our technique, then you're going to be identified at your department as someone who's good at this wizardry, right? Well, what they'll do is they'll use someone who's good, but they don't necessarily know a whole lot about the case. They'll do an interview, they may do an interrogation, and once they get the admission, they'll kind of step out of the room, and they'll get the main investigator in there wanting to go in there and ask them the follow-up questions. But we don't want to do that until around step 9. But if that person gives you the admission, just keep asking.
You should be the one getting the details.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they feel comfortable with you.
Exactly, that's right. They feel comfortable with you. And if you can't think of anything to say, just say what? What happened next? I mean, that's better than feeding them stuff. That's better than just say, hey, what happened next? Okay, and where did you go then? I mean,
right, and don't be correcting people either to, well, wait a minute, Dan, you do remember getting in your car in that parking garage. You do remember burying that knife in the forest, right? Things like that where you're feeding them information.
Exactly.
And again, it may be true what they're saying, but now you're opening yourself up to the defense challenging these statements because you fed them the information.
Exactly. Open-ended, short, concise questions is what we want to do. Let them in their own words do it. That's going to give us enough of the details to go out there. But the last thing any of us wants, my friends, is to be tied up on the defense stand, you didn't do a follow-up, they told you where stuff was, and something else that you may actually get. And I've kind of seen this too, unfortunately, in law enforcement, and I don't think it's malign intent. I think that people just get overworked. The person during the course of their detailed confession, Dan, might actually tell you about another crime that was actually committed out there. And a lot of them are like, well, it sounds like it was in a different part of town. That's not my jurisdiction. I'm just going to stick with this. If they do something like that, that's not, I would say, hey, get in contact.
Follow up. That's a good point. Yeah. But try not to get off the topic that you're talking with the person about. Say, Frank, I'm glad you told me about that, but first I want to finish up here, and then as soon as you finish what you think of all the details, then now, Frank, earlier you mentioned to me this. If you start maybe getting off track, if they tell you something that is important but not related to your case, sometimes you start going down all these different roads and you kind of lose focus of what you're trying to do. You're going to cover it, but don't ask too many questions about it immediately. Finish up what you're doing, and then in that same session, go back. Now, Frank, you said about this. Now, let's talk about that a little bit more.
Exactly. Yes. That, that especially there. It's really going to help. It's going to cover you up from any kind of, getting hemmed up. And again, my friends, I'll tell you this, it's really a great feeling. If you haven't had it yet, you're going to know it whenever you experience it. When you get that admission and you get that kind of, it's a weird dynamic in there. It's a thrilling experience, but it's going to be really tempting to get the confession, charge them right up the, take them to a jail, put a hold on them, then go back and get the arrest warrant. But you want to pump the brakes just a little bit if they gave you information follow up. And this is where having a good supervisor, if you're a manager or supervisor, really important. If your people are working a political case, tell that sheriff or tell that agency head, hey, can we hold off on any press debriefings? Let my people have a day after the booking to do some follow-up on it. Because I'll tell you from personal experience, especially with domestic and sexual assault cases, is that if you get a confession from somebody in a case like that, there's normally family members around the victim or the suspect, and they're going to hate your guts. As the investigator, they're going to be angry at law enforcement because you're telling them news that they don't want to hear. Maybe you're uncovering a generational pattern of abuse and neglect or something. So you don't want your sheriff posting Facebook stuff on everything that you did in the case. So supervisors, sometimes you may have to stand up for yourself and say, hey, boss, can you hold off about a day? My people have follow-up work, because you may need their cooperation to substantiate some of this stuff. And if they see all of a sudden on Facebook that their cousin or brother was arrested for something really terrible, they might go up into their room and throw everything away. They may intentionally do something. Exactly.
Destroy evidence.
Yeah. So hold off on the press release, guys. Hold off. Tell your boss, hey, can we just wait a day, or even that night? Just go out there, try and get whatever evidence that you can possibly get, and kind of move on with it. But that's why it's so important. It's so important, Dan.
Okay, Frank.
Well, I think yes, it is. I think that about wraps it up. Dan, do you have anything else for our viewers and listeners?
No, I don't. But again, as Frank said, is that if you like this, please subscribe. And again, we certainly want your feedback and your questions about some topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. And we'll make sure that we address all your concerns and topics.
All right, Dan. Well, thank you so much for your time. And we're going to be working really hard, my friends. We will be producing content throughout the holiday season. And every Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, drop by, hear us out, watch us. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, reidontherecord@gmail.com. That's where you can hit Dan and myself up. So really appreciate it.
Thank you,
right.
Frank. Okay,
You're
and
welcome.
have a nice holiday. Yeah.
You too. Until next time.